We'll call the Town Plan and Zoning Commission regular meeting of, I'm sorry, this is a special meeting, isn't it?
No, it's actually a regular meeting.
Regular meeting
Yep.
of August 30th, 2017 to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Have the secretary read the roll, please.
Chairman Arruda.
Here.
Commissioner Canelo.
Here.
Commissioner Claffey. Commissioner Langer. Commissioner Payne.
Here.
Commissioner Sierra.
Here.
Commissioner Sobieski.
Here.
Commissioner Vitalica. Commissioner Cangrave. Commissioner Fox.
Yeah.
We'll have Commissioner Fox sit in for Commissioner Minor. Approval of the agenda. Is there any changes you have?
No changes.
I have a change. Is the applicant for the Chick-fil-A here? Okay, I want to ask the commission if we could move item B to the first position under old business, because it's, I think, under the temporary sign is going to take some time to go through the regulation and the approval process.
Make a motion. Second.
Motion made, second. Any questions, comments? Okay, we're going to change that, Mr. Planner.
Yep.
Next item on the agenda, public participation. Anyone from the public wishing to speak at this time, come forward, state your name and address for the record. Okay, seeing none, remarks by commissioners. None at this time. There are no public hearings tonight. Approval of minutes of June 28th, July 12th, and July 26th.
Make a motion to approve all three. Second.
Motion made and second. Any comments, corrections, additions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? New business, there is no new business. We're into old business. Read petition 2717, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Petition 27-17, site plan approval, drive-through restaurant at 3240 Berlin Turnpike, Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A Incorporated applicant, Ruby Back LLC, owner Susan A. Hayes, 100 Pearl Street, Hartford, Connecticut. Contact.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for moving this up on the agenda. And my name is Anthony Donato with Bowler Engineering, and we're just back here. We were here, I believe, a couple of weeks ago or a month ago, and we just come back here for the site plan approval. There was some outstanding comments from the engineering department in regards to the stormwater management, and I just wanted to advise the board that I did meet with Mr. DiMaria and Mr. Minor and the town's engineering consultant yesterday, and there's just a few small outstanding issues, just button up the report just to collaborate the format, and we plan on resubmitting that shortly. And I guess Mr. Minor could attest to that. I believe that the changes that are left are pretty minor on our end. I don't anticipate any major changes with regards to the stormwater management system or the layout of the site.
How did they resolve the
It was more of how we were going to work the model presented in the format that Mr. DiMaria would like. He had requested that we use like a certain method, the rational method, and we're going to just change that, and we're going to add the roof water to the detention pond on the corner of the site.
Yep.
But we're only going to treat it for the water quality volume, and as it is now, we believe it's sized sufficiently to take the water quality volume from the roof. If not, we might have to expand it slightly, but we don't anticipate much of a change.
The size of that retention basin probably could take half of the town of Newington. That's how big it is. I'm familiar with the site. I walked the site. It's a huge and deep retention basin. It's never been filled. It doesn't have standing water in it.
So this was in regards to the newer LID requirements that were incorporated, I believe, in 2006 or 2005. And it's for this basin in particular, and it was just, and he had asked that we direct the roof water there. And as I mentioned, I believe that we have sufficient water quality volume as it is to take that without altering it.
Mr. Payne.
Originally, you were taking just part of it, and now you're going to take all of it, is that correct?
Well, originally we were connected into a catch basin structure that was actually bypass, that was the actually overflow from the rain garden. So now we're just going to be piping it directly into the rain garden. And then when the rain garden fills up, it'll just enter the overflow and then just pipe out. And eventually connect into the stormwater, the detention pond for the whole development.
Okay.
Okay. You satisfied with the,
Yes.
you're part of the meeting? Okay. Very good. Any questions from the commissioners? This is a carryover. We had some engineering questions at the last meeting, and they went back, the applicant went back to the acting town engineer, or the consultant that's acting as the town engineer, and they worked out the problem. So we're at a point where we could move this forward. I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair.
Yeah, we have a motion, please.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve with conditions petition 27-17, site plan approval, drive-through restaurant at 3240 Berlin Turnpike, Chick-fil-A Incorporated, applicant Ruby Back LLC, owner Susan A. Hayes, 100 Pearl Street, Hartford, Connecticut. Contact. Conditions: 1, the site plan shall be revised to address the comments of the acting town engineer to his satisfaction.
Motion made.
Second.
Motion made and second. Any comments or questions on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, you're all set.
Thank you.
It's approved. Okay, I want to read the next item, the 2417.
Petition 24-17, text amendment, section 6.2, temporary sign regulations, Town Planning and Zoning Commission applicant.
Okay, I'll turn it over to the town planner to just run through it real quickly, and then we'll get into questions and comments from the commissioners and try to come up with some kind of a motion.
Okay. The main, I think, impetus behind the amendment was the commission's concern with temporary signs that appeared to be overwhelming the town. They were allowed for a limited number of days, but they could be out 24/7. And in addition to that, there was some concern with the visual impact of temporary signs on the Berlin Turnpike. So the regulation has been amended to require that temporary signs be out only during the hours that the business is open. The sign will have to be close to the main entrance of the building. The regulation draft in front of you says 10 feet, but I think the commission would feel better with it being limited to 5 feet. And under this amendment, the permit for a temporary sign would be good for 4 months, and subject to renewal. I just want to look for that. Yes, paragraph A. Yes, for 4 months, but that the owner of the sign can apply for a continuation for that sign. And that's it in a nutshell. If the commissioners want to talk about any specific aspects of the regulation, we could do that, or whatever the commission would like to do at this point.
Okay, so this one-page, section 2.2.2, temporary signs is the temporary sign. It's a one-page document.
This is it. Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to open it up for the commission comments or questions? Any commissioners have any comments on the regulation as it is proposed here in front of you? No? Dominic?
Yeah, I have a few things. I think it would be, you might find that this might be useful here. I have something that I put underneath temporary signs as a introduction, and it says, it is the intention of these temporary sign regulations to promote public safety, protect property values, create an attractive business climate, to enhance, protect the physical appearance of the community and the quality of life from excessive temporary signs. I don't know if anybody's interested in adding that to underneath the temporary signs. And then, Mr. Chairman, I have some other things I'd like to bring up too.
Go ahead. I don't see any other comments from the other commissioners.
The first thing would be, I think that it's necessary for us to put in here, approval from this commission is necessary for all temporary signs and banners, et cetera. So that it's clear that this commission gets to see every applicant that comes in.
At least for the first initial, temporary sign
Okay,
permit.
the first sentence, permits for temporary ground signs in any commercial zone may be approved by the Town Plan and Zoning Commission for a formal period. You want that changed to shall be approved? Make it
I
firmer?
just had a whole new section. I just put this as approval from the commission is necessary for all temporary signs.
Okay, it already says that. So I just wanted to ask, do you want it to sound stronger, which is,
And then,
Make it
and then
clear.
I'll read you what I have for your A, because I had put, what you had for A, I changed it a little bit. Permits for temporary ground signs in any commercial zone may be approved by the Town Planning and Zoning Commission for 3-month period and may be renewed for one or more additional 3-month period with the commission approval. If you think that that other section where I had approval from the commission is necessary for all temporary signs and banners, et cetera, is not necessary, then we can remove it.
Why I like the portion, putting in there about the banners and the inflatables is that temporary ground signs are different than banners and inflatables on buildings. So someone could misinterpret that as that we only want to see ground signs or the A-frame signs. And in reality, we want to see the banners, the inflatables, we want to see everything.
okay, so paragraph I, you want to be more prominent so that people don't
Right, we don't want.
fail to see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
We want them to be able to know that any temporary sign or banner or inflatable or has to come to the commission for approval. At least for the initial permit.
And then I'm a little confused on your A. It says, Town Planning and Zoning Commission in accordance with section 6.2.2.1. Permits for other temporary signs in any commercial zone may be approved.
Yeah, that's an
in
I.
accord-
That's Roman numeral. I mean, that's a capital letter I. In other words, the last paragraph.
2.2I.
Yeah.
Read that section.
And there is no I.
No, the last paragraph is I.
Oh, you're saying
Yes, right.
He's saying 6 point, it's on this right here on the bottom. I. You're trying to
Okay.
find it in the existing.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it in here. Okay, all right. Well, okay. I didn't really like that I at all. But, all right, let me proceed with the next thing.
You're on basically C. Is there anything that you have changes in that?
The zone commission that signs will not create an excessive clutter or impede pedestrians. All other provisions of 6.2.2 shall apply.
Which is this,
The whole thing.
this here. This is
You're not
6.2.2,
Okay.
not the old one, the new one. All of these conditions apply. All other,
Because in here, it's 6.2.2 is about residential signs.
Yes, we're talking about the new 6.2.2, and that sentence is in there so that nobody thinks that all they need to do in a multi-tenant building is comply with paragraph C. They need to comply with everything in this section, the not more than 4 months, the process of getting it
this is
renewed.
being, apparently, this is being,
That'll be renumbered.
that'll be,
Replace.
That'll be
You're not gonna have
renumbered. It will be
We're
renumbered.
replacing it.
It will be renumbered.
Yeah, but then why would you use the same number as the residential signs?
It
We're
will-
not even talking about
It will no
residential.
longer be 622. It'll be 625 or something. It'll be renumbered.
Okay. You talk about, in a multi-tenant building, temporary ground signs may be permitted on the walkway or sidewalks. Are you not permitting them for a single tenant? So I had changed it a little bit. Your C would be,
take your time.
I have permits for temporary ground signs in any commercial zone. Let's see. So my A, on this B. I had changed it to, in any building, temporary ground signs may be permitted on the walkway or sidewalk in the front of the applicant's leased portion of the building on privately owned property where the town planning and zoning commission finds that such signs will not create excessive clutter or impede pedestrians. Which basically I took out in a multi-tenant building and I said in any building, because it applies to, it doesn't just apply to a multi-tenant building, it applies to any business. It could be a single property.
Well, I think the way this evolved was, it was assumed from the beginning that a single tenant building would be allowed to have a temporary sign. And then as we thought about it more, and you brought up the point about multi-tenant buildings, basically plazas on the Berlin Turnpike, which are kind of different from the single tenant building, they too should be able to have signs. And that was a different enough context that I thought deserved to have its own paragraph, which is how paragraph C came into being, so that multi-tenant buildings, tenants in plazas, clearly know that they too can have a sign, and that the commission can approve basically numerous signs in front of a plaza type building. Everything in this regulation applies to the typical temporary sign in front of the single tenant building. Paragraph C basically just says all of this is also available to multi-tenant buildings.
It's never written anywhere that it applies to other buildings, so you're assuming that it applies. That's why I just took it out and said any building is, or it could be any building or multi-tenant building.
Okay, but I see your point, but then I think we lose the distinction. So maybe to do what you want to do, let's change, let's add language to paragraph A, something to the effect of,
In any single occupant building or multi-tenant building.
or multi-tenant building.
So that
Add
would
that
be-
language to A.
Or C, right, where we're talking about.
Well, I want to keep C, I want to keep C the way it is so that tenants in multi-tenant buildings understand that they too can have a sign. The whole regulation applies to your average business who is the only occupant of that building. Paragraph C drills down for the business that's in a plaza. But we can add some language to paragraph A something to the effect of permits for temporary ground signs in front of any building in any commercial zone, if you would like. We can certainly do that.
Okay.
In front of any building.
Next thing I had is the temporary ground signs must have approval from the owner of the property.
Oh, absolutely. That's a given.
It's not written.
It doesn't have to be. An application has to have the signature of the owner. That's housekeeping.
Thought it would be nice to have it in here so people understood and knew it.
Well,
I mean,
then they might
yours-
say, why doesn't it say that everywhere, that the application has to be signed by the owner? But we can add that just to clarify it for someone who might not otherwise realize it. Yeah, but we can add that somewhere. Let me make a note of that.
Why did we scratch items C, the distance between the signs?
Oh, because if you think about it, if the sign has to be 5 feet or 10 feet, whatever, from the door,
Right.
there's no way any two signs could be less than 25 feet apart, because the front doors are going to be at least 10 or 20 feet apart. There may be a few exceptions. There may be a few exceptions, like in a plaza, where it just happens that both doors are next to each other, even though the stores that they open to.
That's why we put it in there.
Just in case.
Well, we can put it back.
I think Bob Sarah brought up the point and gave the illustration of how that worked. And there are instances where in the plazas and even in the center district where the doorways are less than 25 feet apart. And he gave the illustration and gave the explanation of why we had to go to 20, why we wanted
We should
to
keep that.
separate
Okay,
it. So we really should keep that in
Okay,
there.
that's easy enough.
Okay, go ahead.
On your E, it says temporary ground signs shall have no more than 12 square feet of message area, example, 2 by 3, 2 sides, and be no more than 5 feet in total height. I think that it shouldn't say more than 4 feet in total height.
That's a pretty high sign.
Yeah. I don't think the temporary signs are taller than 4 feet. Do you, Mike?
Yeah, I think 5 feet is too high also. I don't know where we came.
The problem is that we want to be able to have sight line over the sign. You want to be able to see over the sign if something's coming
Well,
at
that's
you.
right. I think 5 feet is
So
too high.
5
no?
feet is, could be a problem.
The 5 feet, where that came from was I went on the internet and did some shopping for these A-frame signs, and they're typically 5 feet high. If you include the handle that sometimes they'll have, if you include the feet that then raise the message portion, it comes to.
Is that when they're standing straight up with, or is it when they're like this? So, I mean, is the A-frame possibly 5 feet, but then when it's placed in position, it's lower than 5 feet? Is that possible?
This was a couple of months ago when I did the research, but that's where I came up with the 5 feet. That's what I was seeing when I searched for them on the internet, that they seem to be typically 5 feet high.
Okay, just appeared to be a little higher than what I've seen, but I think we should check into that.
Commissioner Sobieski, what do you think?
I agree with Commissioner Payne. I think 4 feet. I think 5 is a little too high.
I don't know if these are custom-made, these signs, or you could go on the internet and buy them. I know there's people in town that sell signs, these type of signs. There's sign companies in town that sell them. And the ones that I've seen are a lot shorter than 5 feet. Yeah. I think we got to change that.
Okay.
You have a better sight line over the sign. Okay.
Okay.
Then go to F.
So your F, the temporary ground signs shall be placed not more than 10 feet from the main entrance to the business and shall not impede pedestrian traffic. I think that it shouldn't be more than 5 feet from the entranceway door.
Okay.
I think we all agreed on that when we went through the initial setup of the regulation. It was always 5 feet,
Okay.
so we're going to change that.
Okay. The next one was temporary ground signs shall be displayed during normal business hours only and shall not be placed in a street right-of-way except as provided in section
Oh,
6.2.
Yes.
Point C.
Yeah, we could take that out now.
Okay.
Yep, yep.
And
Yeah,
then-
take out that second phrase.
Where it-
Just, and with normal business hours only, period. And take out, and shall not be placed in any street wide or right of way. Oh, period. Yeah, delete the except as provided for. But leave in the, and shall not be placed in any street right of way.
Should it say front yard or street right away? Front yard setback? Didn't we say that we didn't want them in any front yard setbacks, or
Right, no, that was only on the Berlin Turnpike, that you don't want them in the front yard.
why would we want them anywhere else? Don't we want to be consistent?
Because there's nowhere other, well, no, we're setting a higher standard for the Berlin Turnpike because that's,
I think that's higher standard than should be for the whole town. It should, if we don't let the Berlin Turnpike put it in the front yard setback and the right of way, then that should be consistent throughout all the zones.
well, you could, but the reason the commission didn't talk about that during the public hearing was because the idea was that you wanted to hold the Berlin Turnpike to a higher aesthetic standard than elsewhere in town. But if that's not your feeling now, you can.
It kind of like is mute because we're also saying they can't be any farther than 5 feet from the door, so.
Right, so
in one.
it could be academic in many cases.
Yep, okay.
So, okay, so do
But you
you
got to
want?
remember that this regulation now applies to banners and the banners and the inflatables and all the rest of the stuff too.
Right.
So I'd rather, err on the side of caution here and have more in the regulation so that people have a better understanding of what we're looking for than have them come in here with expectations of doing something and then find out that that's not what our intent was.
Well, if you noticed in the memo I wrote to you, when someone applies for a temp sign permit, they'll meet with Mike. Mike will explain to them what the commission's expectations are. Any problems with the application, Mike will work out with the applicant before it even gets to you. So they'll know. They'll know before they get to you what your expectations are.
One of the other things it says is if you're basically not complying, you're subject to immediate confiscation by the town. My concern is that you're trying to confiscate a sign that's on private property. So when they come in for their application for this temporary sign, will we need a waiver from them giving us permission to confiscate their sign from that private property?
Right. That sentence was a holdover from something that was changed. So yes, we should delete that and simply say that temporary ground signs in a street right-of-way are subject to confiscation, because those are, in fact, we confiscate them all the time, the staff, the ones that are on the right-of-way.
So if they do take a temporary permit out for a sign, but they're not complying, we can't really go confiscate it. They would get a zoning warning.
If it's on
or-
private property.
If it's on private property.
If it's in the right-of-way, we just take it.
Yeah, if it's going to be 5 feet from their door, and let's say they're leaving it out at night and they're not taking it in. So then the zoning official would see that, and he would have to send them a violation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. But anything in the front yard setback or street right-of-way would be confiscated? Or only the street right-of-way do we have a permit? Only the street right-of-way do we have permission to take out right away?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, that's pretty clear. Keep going.
The signs that are in the town center, I still think that we need to have something on there. I don't know whether or not you researched every piece of property in the town center or not, but I think that some of those buildings are very close to the town's property line. So if a temporary sign is put on the town of Newington land, town center, then permission from the town manager and a certificate of insurance naming the town as additional insured is required.
I think that protects the town in case there are instances where the property line is right at the front door. So the sign would be on town property.
Right. Okay?
It can't hurt to have that in there. Commissioner Fox.
Back to G. Once a sign is confiscated, is that final?
Oh, no, they can come and get it back.
And
They could come and get the sign back, but when they come in for renewal, then maybe we want to have them come back. Instead of doing it administratively, maybe the commission would say, we want that person back in here. So every time that someone came for a renewal, the enforcement officer and the planner would make sure that the commission knew that this person is coming back, and we would give them an indication whether we wanted them in here or they could do it administratively. If there's no problems and there's no complaints or anything, and they're meeting the regulation, we would say, go ahead, give them another 3 months without them coming here. But if there's a problem, we want to see them. Maybe we could straighten out the problem and they could continue to have the sign.
We didn't address anything in your temporary signs for new businesses coming to town or a new business under new management scenario. So I think that needs to be addressed. We have it in our old regulations.
Yeah, the reason we didn't leave it in there is because we couldn't come up with any way to do that wasn't unconstitutional. Because remember how once you give people permission to have any kind of location, size, material, you can't control what's on that sign. So there's no way legally to give a new business extra signage benefits than an existing
They
business.
could come in under this regulation and ask for a banner on the building.
Right?
So that's how they would get the extra signage for their grand
Right, they
opening.
could do that.
Okay.
Commissioner Sarah.
Just a question, is there any provision, I read through this, I didn't see it, going back if we do have a offender, let's say it's a repeat offender, keeps violating this, do we have any recourse as far as revoking somebody's permit?
Yes, theoretically you do, but the due process takes so long that the 3 months will probably run out by the time you've given this person their due process rights. I think the best recourse will be just not to renew their permit 3 months later. I mean, we'll cite them, we'll send the notice of violation and do all the usual things. But as you've experienced through the CEO's monthly reports to you, when people want to drag their feet, I don't want to say play the game, but because it's their constitutional right to due process, but when they take advantage of their rights to due process, it takes months and months and months.
So they would come in for the renewal and we would not renew it.
Right.
It's that
I
simple.
thought with the new ticket system that we're going to install, that should alleviate that. Am I correct?
Well, that just gets a fine. That doesn't,
It should improve things. But it's not in place yet.
right.
Right, but
Remember,
once,
the
but
ticket
it's-
system is not just for signs, it's for any zoning violation.
what I was asking, that should speed up the process a little bit.
No, all that will do is make it quicker to get fines, to get the person's $100 a day fine or whatever, but it doesn't expedite the process of making the person stop doing what the violation is.
It
still has to go to a
speeds
court.
up the process compared to the process that is taking place today. We all confirm that.
The finding process.
The finding process, it speeds up that process so that a hand-delivered warning or fine could be hand-delivered to the tenant, and he will most likely comply. If he doesn't, then there's a whole nother process.
Right.
Okay.
so if they don't comply after being fined, so then they just don't get another permit from us.
That's how it's gonna work.
Right.
Okay,
The real estate signs and the
Yeah,
construction signs.
how do we handle real estate signs, and was one of my concerns. I think that the real estate broker signs are staying out way too long on the properties. They're also, I don't think that the real estate signs should be allowed in street right-of-ways. if we're not allowing other temporary signs in the street right-of-ways, why should we let the real estate brokers put them in the street right-of-ways? Because we're saying it's a safety problem, so it should be a safety problem for the 4x4 broker signs too.
Yeah, how are we handling
Yeah, again,
those signs?
yeah, again, that's why, getting back to what I said about the constitutional free speech issue, that's why we chose not to go there with this new regulation.
But, you know, I think we got a little wrong here, because you also said the gas stations, you could have digital signs only for your numbers, right?
For the prices.
For the prices. Well, now,
You currently do.
now that's really kind of the fine line there. You told the gas stations they could have digital signs, but you're not allowing anybody else to have them. So are we, you know?
I think that, yeah, your frustration is understandable. I think those gas station signs, I think if push came to shove, they're not legal. But nobody's pushing us on it, and it's probably just as well that they don't.
And I think the same scenario could be placed, that if we put some requirements on real estate broker signs, it'll be fine until we're challenged. If we ever get challenged.
The way it is now, I mean, the real estate signs are in the right of ways. He mentioned that they stay up too long. I mean, I've seen some signs that have been up for 3 or 4 years in the property,
I mean,
on some of these properties.
Like the mobile gas station, we asked them to take that sign down. I think Stanley or somebody asked them to take it down. It's been up forever. They sold the property, and I thought the town asked them to take it down, and it's still not down.
See, they're using these real estate signs for advertisement, not for trying to sell the property. They're using it to advertise their name by having them all over town and keeping them up on properties that have been sold or what.
Yeah.
There's a piece of property on Fen Road that has 4 signs on it.
Yeah,
One
yeah.
piece of property.
The reason we left out what's currently paragraph B, not more than 2 for sale or for rent signs, not over 6 square feet in an area, look at least 10 feet from the lot line. We left that out because it's probably not legal. But as Commissioner Payne said, we could put it back in and
Well, we should give
see
them
what happens.
some direction as to, at least we don't want it in the right of way.
And
well,
we
that
don't
goes
want
without
mo-
saying. No signs can be in the right of way.
And I don't think we should allow a broker to have more than 1 sign on a piece of property. I think 1 sign is sufficient.
You can limit the number of signs. You just can't limit what the sign says.
Yeah, I'm not talking about what it says. I'm just saying,
Well, yeah, because
one
if
per.
it's a for sale sign, you're
One
talking.
per property.
But if we're talking about for sale signs, we're talking about what the sign says, and then we are regulating the content. If we're letting them have extra signs because they say for sale, we are giving them extra signs because of what it says.
I think we're
and
taking
that
it way too far. I've looked through 5, 6 other towns, and they have that. They have all these other things, areas covered too. I got to wonder if we're reading into this latest case too much.
We're being squeaky clean, and that's up to the commission whether you want to do that or not. I'm sure those towns haven't revised their regs since that Supreme Court decision.
How do we justify the size of those signs?
Because that you are allowed to do. You're allowed to regulate the size and the
Of a specific sign, a real estate, only the real estate sign can have a 4-foot sign?
You can regulate the size of a sign, but you can't regulate what the sign says. So what that then means is you can't give someone permission to have an extra real estate sign because you are in effect saying you can have an extra sign, but only if it says a certain thing. That's the backdoor way of regulating content, which you're no longer allowed to do.
So you can now say those real estate signs are not allowed, or any sign's not allowed in the right-of-way.
That's always.
That's always the case.
That's always been.
Yeah.
Okay. So then what, are you going to ignore anything else about the real estate signs, no matter where it is?
When you say ignored,
There are no rules, no regulations?
that's probably the better way to do it. Because, I mean, I think most people would agree that it's reasonable for someone to be able to put a for sale sign out in front of their house.
Yeah, we're not
So maybe-
questioning that.
So maybe we just
So how-
let sleeping dogs lie.
And is there something in here that says that there's only one temporary sign per property? Do we have anything like that, or? Because then that would apply to the real estate brokers. They can't put two then.
I think the only temporary signs are the ones that are in this new regulation that we're coming up with. Yeah, so these are
Well, we
the
really
only
can't.
kind of temporary sign would be the ones in this new section 6.2.2.
Stanley, what do you think about the real estate signs? Do you think, Bobby, I mean,
I know when they're up on a turnpike or so, they're well within, they're out of the right of way. They're in the property line. They're in the owner's property when they go up. But I kind of agree with Commissioner Payne that some of these are up there way too long after the property is sold. I think there was one on Dowd Street, stayed up there for like 4 months after the property was sold. So I think once it's sold, there should be some reasonable time frame. They say for sale, sale pending, sold, then it should be X number of days and that sign has to be removed.
well, that mobile sign has been up for,
Well, the mobile sign is something totally different. That should have been removed, in my opinion.
and what about the size of that particular company's sign? I mean, the
That's
sign
something I
is
would-
huge. Those signs are huge.
That's something that would have fallen underneath the town of Newington's responsibility. What size do
They
you want
have
to put up
a
there?
4x4 or
4x4.
5x5 sign. I mean, it's a big sign.
That wouldn't.
That particular real estate company has
That-
it's
that
huge
should
sign,
be-
and they're
probably
all
violation.
over town,
Right.
which is great. I hope they're doing business, but I think they're using them more for getting their name out there than to selling a piece of property.
I agree with that, you know, the sign should be a certain size. And that's it.
Well, that's what he's bringing it up, that we need
Right.
to have some kind of regulation.
2 square
We
feet
need
per
to
side.
put some kind of regulation
You have to have a permit.
that addresses that, because now there is none. And we're saying, oh, well,
Yeah, well,
and if we don't, then we're not giving them any direction as to what they can and can't do, so they'll do whatever they want. I don't think that they should have signs that big. Normal real estate sign is how big?
4x4.
No, that's not a normal real estate sign.
Well, not
That
for
little
residential.
shingle that they put up, that's a 4x4,
Per side,
2 square feet per side.
For residential.
and it's 9 square feet per side.
For
Commercial.
commercial, 9 square feet.
What's that, 3x3?
yeah, apparently the sign regulations, I'll call them the old ones, only allow for sale signs in residential zones. That's odd. I'm not seeing where it says you can have a for sale sign in a business zone, but obviously everyone does, and it hasn't been a problem. So, obviously I like regulations more than the average person, but even I am not sure we really need to regulate for sale signs. I mean, I hear your point about sometimes they stay up a long time and they start to look raggedy, but is the problem really big enough that warrants coming up with a regulation then that everyone has to worry about complying with when it's,
Well,
Is
we're
it
doing the
really
temporary
broke?
signs now. This is a temporary sign. We should cover all the bases for temporary signs. If we should cover the real estate sign, the construction sign, what other signs?
Farm stand sign,
You know, there's a whole bunch of other
Nonprofit
areas.
sign.
I mean,
And
what
you-
are all, what's the,
historical signs, no
the,
trespassing.
right, I mean, there's
Yeah.
a ton of temporary signs, different temporary signs. And then we're doing a regulation, we should do it and have it all inclusive, not leave it up to where, where the zoning enforcement officer goes out and says to him, well, you're not not complying to what? You don't even have a regulation.
right, because I don't think there's a way to legally come up with a separate regulation for sale signs. I don't think there's a way to legally do it under this recent Supreme Court decision. So
You
maybe we
also
should
have
just,
construction signs, and they're doing contractors on your front lawn.
same thing. I know, it's believe me, it's
There's time
crazy.
limits in other
It's
towns for that,
crazy.
too.
But you know how Supreme Court decisions don't always make sense.
Yeah, but contractor signs on construction lawns Commissioner Camello, are only there as long as the guy's working. Once he leaves, they're
No,
gone.
no.
No, they're not.
Some of them, they,
No, some of them leave them there for advertisement.
roofers, signs,
Special
and,
construction can be up to a year in some
The
towns.
chimney guy,
he's all over the place. He's got monument signs
Yeah.
too on Robbins Avenue.
Right.
But normally, that's what I'm saying. I mean, that chimney guy, as a matter of fact, I talked to the planner about a year ago on that. He had it on Main Street for like 3 or 4 weeks. And I thought it was a permanent sign. It's not. It's something he lifts up, puts in the back of his truck, goes to the next job, and drops it off.
Yeah, I know Mike has talked to him about that.
Maybe if we just keep them out of the right-of-ways, and then if we see some that are up too long, we just have the zoning official try to talk them into it.
Yes.
Maybe that would be a
Those
method.
signs, the contractor signs in a residential area are illegal signs. There's no provisions for that in the regulations, is there?
Correct, you were right, there's no provision for
Okay,
that.
so they're illegal signs. When someone puts up, the siding guy has his sign that shows siding and they're gonna side the house, we haven't stopped them, but in reality, that sign should not be there. They can't advertise on a business. They're not even the business,
You can get a sign permit when they get the permit to do the job.
huh?
No?
They can't get,
No.
No, because
They can't put
there's no provision for them to even have it.
right, technically.
I know
Yeah.
some towns cover that,
Yes.
and they say that it has to come down within so many days after the job is completed. I've noticed in almost all the other towns. And that's
That's
similar.
an enforcement issue, so
Yeah.
if the zoning enforcement is monitoring
Yeah.
on a regular basis the town, then he would see that these signs are up
Mm-hmm.
and beyond a certain time, and he's just go in and tell him, you gotta take the sign down.
Okay.
Or, right.
The other area I had was, we talked about it briefly, temporary signs and windows, we talked about. So I wrote up, temporary signs and windows must be on the inside of the windows.
Hang on.
On the inside of the windows and cannot exceed 50% of the window area for safety reasons. I just added the 50%. I saw some towns at 25%, some at a little bit between 25 and 50. And the main reason was that, especially next to the entranceways, that if there's a problem and the police need to go to the property, they need to see into the building. And there's a few businesses that all the windows are totally plastered. And I think that it could be a safety problem if they were ever called out to that property. So I'm just bringing it up for discussion to see if anybody else is concerned about it.
I agree with
That
Commissioner
fall
Payne.
under this regulation?
Well, it'd probably be better to put in a different section. For one thing, because it hasn't been subject to a public hearing, so this is something new. And it's probably would be better someplace other than in the temporary sign regulation. Because who would
temporary
think to look,
sign.
yeah, but who would think to look for it there? It probably should have its own section or be part of the section on commercial signs. But the other thing is, like I said, it wasn't, the public didn't have a chance to comment on that, and I think there may be some businesses who might have strong feelings about taking away their ability to have window signs.
We're not taking away their ability. They can have window
Well,
signs, but they
limiting
gotta
it to
be able
50% of the,
there's, you know, which ones we're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
You drive by and you can't, if there was a robbery in there, the police would be hard pressed to know what the hell was going on without going into the building. So there is no way that they could physically determine what action is going on inside the building until they're inside. which
I
can
think it's a
put
very
the-
good idea.
Put the
I would just-
police in a situation at a disadvantage to the robber.
sure, and fires also.
I don't
No,
have
think it's a good
I don't have
idea.
a problem with maybe adding it somewhere else, since we're not done with all the sign regulations. I don't have a problem with having it somewhere else in the sign regulations instead of
Yeah, we'll
there.
make a note of it, to keep it in mind, yeah.
The only last thing that I have is that, we could have the best regulations possible here, okay? Fantastic regulations, but it's not going to work without the proper zoning enforcement. We've all figured that out. So, do we need some sort of, should this commission come up with some sort of uniform method for the zoning enforcement officer to do his job, basically, to enforce the sign regulations? Should there be a route that he follows, and should he do it twice a week? Or, you know, we need some sort of method for us to stay on top of this. Otherwise, these regulations aren't going to work, even with these new regulations, and I think we'll have a problem.
See, the issue has been, and, you know, Mike could attest to it, that most of his actions as a zoning enforcement officer is generated through complaints. Well, that's all well and good. We want him to be able to you know, answer the complaints and everything, but there's also so much stuff that's being missed because no one's complaining. I mean, as far as, especially the sign on the temporary signs. Because I could drive down the turnpike and find 7 or 8 signs right now. And not just the turnpike, other areas of town. I mean, right on New Britain Avenue in Newington at Stam Industrial Park, the guy that has the hot dog stand has a A-frame out in the middle of New Britain Avenue. He's not even on the New Britain Avenue, he's on Stam Road, and he has balloons attached to it, directing people that he's selling hot dogs down on Stam Road. Well, that's a violation. I mean, he's not even on New Britain Avenue, he's down the street. So, Bob.
Well,
Bob and then Michael.
As I was driving around different towns today through my work, in West Hartford, and I know, Commissioner Ada, you and I told you a little bit about this earlier, but there was a public works van from the town of West Hartford. He was on Trout Brook. As he was coming down Trout Brook, there were some temporary signs. He pulled over, put his lights on the van, went over, grabbed the temporary signs. There was a tag sale sign on a telephone pole, took that off, threw him in the van, got in his van, shut his light off, continued down the road, stopped at the next sign. An hour or two later, I was back in West Hartford. I saw him on a different road doing the same thing. So it's almost like he does have a route that he follows. Now, I don't know if it's certain days. I don't know, how they do it, but it looked like he was on a route. I mean, he knew exactly where he was going, what he was doing. He got out, no nonsense, grabbed the signs, back in the van, on to the next one. So I don't know, maybe we want to consult with them, see how they're doing it, but it was quick, it was efficient, and like I said, he grabbed the sign and on to the next one.
And those are all in street right-of-ways.
Correct. Those are all in street right-of-ways.
Okay, you have anything?
I only have one other thing, which is on the banners, you described the banners,
So much per square foot.
yeah, one linear foot of, 1 square foot for each linear foot of building frontage.
Right. That's pretty much the same size as a standard sign, not a temporary sign, a permanent sign.
Right.
That's the regulation for a permanent sign. That's the size.
correct.
Not on the Berlin Turnpike, but in other areas of town.
Yeah, anyway.
Berlin Turnpike is 2 square feet.
So my concern is, I don't want that sign on Stu Leonard's to be grandfathered. It is 6 feet by 60 feet. 360 square feet, but I don't know how long their building is. And I don't want to see that 1 or 2 people are grandfathered when we do this new regulation. So I'd like to have the banner to be consistent with theirs throughout the rest of the town.
Whatever the ratio is for Stu
Correct.
Leonard would be the same ratio elsewhere? Okay.
Correct.
Well, that we'd like to find out what the ratio is.
All right, well, let me
300
find that, yeah, okay.
360 square feet of signage might be too big for might be 3 linear feet for every.
It's probably close to
Square feet.
300 feet long, that side of the building is.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know what the exact measurement is. So it could be it could be a little bit more than 1 foot per linear foot. It could be 1.5 or something, or 1 point something. And I'm just
I
wondering,
think that's too much.
no, I don't think it's too much. I think that the sign that Stu's has, the 6 foot by 60 feet, is not too big for the size of building that they have. But I'd like to use that
As the
Oh,
template.
okay.
as the template.
So so you think that, we no longer should require these banners to be 1 square foot per linear foot of building frontage?
Or just do the math and see whatever
Whatever
Stu
it
Leonard's
comes-
is.
Whatever, yeah,
Correct.
whatever that one is, then we'll
If it
tailor it to that.
if it exceeds the 1 foot, then I would be concerned, but if it doesn't, then we'll leave the 1 foot.
And that's all.
Right, okay.
Bob, Sarah?
Commissioner Payne done? I don't want to cut in on you.
No,
No,
go ahead.
I'm all set, Bob.
All right. Just going back to one thing, the size on the sandwich boards. I know we're talking 4 feet, 5 feet. I don't know what the industry standard is, and I don't want to see somebody have to start making a custom sign if they don't make a 4 foot. Can we look into, see what the industry standard is, and then,
We did, it's 5. That's why I proposed 5.
43 inches, I just looked. There's nothing over 4 feet tall.
Okay,
Okay,
found
so you,
something different.
And that was with chalkboard,
Yep,
plastic
mhm.
board.
What'd you do? Search,
I
search
I went
A-frame
right-
signs?
A-frame signs.
so
Okay.
the maximum could be 4
4
feet, so
4
this,
feet
a standard,
All right.
and standard A-frame sign is less than, it's 5 inches less than the maximum.
I just don't want to cause these business owners undue expense having to have something
All the
custom
ones
made.
that I've seen that are out, what's the sign guy on Payne
They're,
Road? What's his
they're
name?
all lower than the 5
Yeah,
feet.
Right.
he has them out once in a while.
That's what handles and everything else.
Yeah, and they're,
With
they're
handles.
short. They're
Okay.
only this,
Yeah.
all right,
normal.
okay. We'll change that to
3 feet,
no more than 4 feet in total height.
maximum 4 feet.
Okay. Okay,
That Mike's a real whiz with that computer, isn't he? Thanks, Mike. Anything else?
I think that's it, but I'm
Do you,
confused on what we have.
yeah,
But,
that's a lot of
lot of
amendment.
changes.
Yeah.
how do you want to proceed, Mr. Planner? Or commissioners, how do you want to proceed? I mean, we just hatcheted the proposed amendment. We made some serious changes. We put some additions to it. I don't want to hold this up, but then I don't want to put out a document that's half done.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the motion would read with all these changes.
Yeah, we have a motion that does not have any conditions or anything on it. I mean, it's basically,
We also on the banners here on, what is it, HI, not to exceed 2 in number. We're going to allow 2 banners? No, let's see here, attached to the building, not to, temporary signage includes cold air inflatables and banners attached to the building, not to exceed 2 in number.
Right, so they could have 2 others, such as a banner, or 2 banners, or a cold air inflatable, but not to exceed the
Not to
the 1
exceed 2
foot.
banners.
Not to exceed 2 in number, and not to exceed an area more than whatever the number you end up coming up,
I mean, I think we're going to give them we're giving them a lot of square footage. If we're using the same method that the Stu's has got, and if we're using that thing, we're giving them a lot of square footage for banners. I'm wondering, where else are they going to put another banner? So, I mean, why would we have 2 banners? But could this also mean they could have 1 banner and 1 of something else?
Yes, they can have one of all of the above. And the reason the staff is suggesting this is we're giving the market options. Because some landlords are not going to let the tenant put a banner up. So,
And
not everyone.
that would all come in front of us anyway, so we'd get to
Yes.
see whether they were proposing 2 banners and 1 inflatable or
Right.
pennants or what. Yep, okay.
anything else? Okay, Commissioner remarks at this time? I mean, other remarks? How do we proceed here? I mean, how do we vote on this? With
First,
it?
do we want to review what we have so far?
Yeah, we could.
That may take another year and a half.
No, we gotta move this, but, I gotta have a regulation that's clean, not all chopped up with different pieces of paper and, I mean, I need one sheet that has all of these items on it and addresses all of these things. I mean, the way it is now, we have, just on the sheet that we have, we put back in item C, we change the period, we changed the height, we changed the distance, we scratched out some stuff in here. I mean, how do you make a motion that it covers all of these intricacies without making the change to this?
I think we're gonna have to get a cleaned up copy for our next meeting, unfortunately, and then review that. I don't know about the other commissioners, but
We doing anything with real estate signs? 7 days after the sale's complete, it has to be removed, something like that.
Well, the old regulation, and it's still on the books, says that not more than 2, quote, for sale or, quote, for rent signs not over 6 square feet in area and located at least 10 feet from the lot line is allowed. That's under the heading of is allowed.
Right.
If you tell me to, I will put this back in.
Yes.
what number is that under the old regulation?
Yeah, 622B.
B, not more than 2 for sale or for rent signs, not over 6 square feet in area, and located at least 10 feet from the property line. Would you address this as 1 for commercial and 1 for residential?
Yeah, you're gonna have to,
Okay.
because the sizes are different.
The sizes are different, maybe that 6 square feet covers residential, and then 9
square feet.
9 or 4x4. is
9 square feet.
9
is
square
3
feet is
by
3 by 3
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a big sign.
In a non-residential zone?
in a non-residential
okay.
zone. And only 1 per property?
Yeah, 1 per
And,
property.
and instead of saying an area located at least 10 feet from the property line, 10 feet in from the property line, is that what it is?
Yeah, from the property line. It'd have to be in, because it couldn't be out, because then it would be on somebody else's property.
10 feet in sideways, what about
From any property line.
from any property line, 10 feet in?
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so you're gonna add that as another item under,
Yes.
That's good.
so you think you covered everything?
I think we covered everything. I mean, we'll have an opportunity to look at what we have in a full format next meeting, and then make sure that there's nothing else that comes up.
Right, and when you get the package before the meeting, if you see something that you don't like or you think should be changed, give me a call.
Yeah,
And we can talk about
change
it.
Okay.
I was hoping that we could have moved this tonight, but under the conditions and the changes that we made and the questions that were raised, I can't see how we could do it without doing a poor job. We'd have a poor document to give to the people. I'd rather just another 2 weeks and we'll have the right document. We will vote on it in 2 weeks. Just do what the planner says. If you get this, you'll get this before the meeting, so review it. You see something you don't like, let's talk about it so that he can make the changes before the meeting, so that we could have a motion and a amendment that coincide with each other, and have some meat into the motion purposes and other things that show that we've done our due diligence on this particular thing. So I'm sorry that we couldn't do it tonight, but we gotta, I mean, you heard all the different changes. I can't act on something that's half-baked.
Mr. Chairman, I had added under temporary signs in the very beginning, I added a sentence about the intent. I don't know whether or not the commission
Give that to-
decided whether or
Give that
not,
to the planner, and
I don't know whether or not the other commissioners thought it was
You think that we need the
Was
intent
needed or not.
in the regulation or part of the motion?
I actually always like intent regulations. When I came to Newington, I suggested we add some, and the commission didn't care for it, but I
It's
think,
a different commission.
yeah, I like having intent paragraphs, okay.
So give that
Yeah.
language to the planner so that that can be
Yeah.
the first thing under temporary signs, the first item. Okay, any other questions, any other things on the temporary sign? So we're going to continue this till under, we're going to continue this under old business to the next meeting. When's the next meeting?
I think the 9th for some reason, the second
13th?
Wednesday. 13th. Okay, 13th.
Okay, so another week, couple of weeks, and we'll be all set. Okay, we're into petition for public hearings. Mr. Planner?
Okay, this is the Goddard School daycare that the commission approved the site plan for a couple of months ago. They now want a freestanding sign out in front.
Yeah.
So I recommend the hearing be scheduled for your next meeting.
Any commissioner comments or remarks on the scheduling? Okay, schedule it for the next meeting. Town planners report.
Okay, got a couple of things. Okay, at the last meeting, the commission talked about McDonald's request to be able to have a digital menu board. And as I keep telling you, we have a problem. If we allow a sign, we have to allow that sign for anybody, regardless of what they want to say on it. So carving out an exception to the digital sign prohibition for menu signs is dicey, because if we allow digital signs for a restaurant, then we would have to allow a digital sign for a beauty parlor. But I can try. I might be able to come up with, as I say in my memo, some regulation, because you can regulate location. So maybe I can come up with a way of allowing digital menu boards that are a certain distance from the street or a certain distance from the building or some.
No, we don't even want to open that.
Okay, good, thank you.
I'm looking at my commissioners, and I don't see anybody going.
Well, good, thank you, because that would be a challenge.
I think that we let sleeping dogs lie. We have a regulation. They don't fit the regulation, and they'll have to have the menu boards the way they are now.
Okay, good, all right. The next.
I don't want to open up that door and then find out 3 months from now that we got a deluge of people coming in for just what you said, beauty parlors and everything else wants digital signs, and then you get into the TVs, the signs that are actually televisions, and you've seen them on the highways. They were actually a television.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Okay, the next item, I just want to bring the commission up to date on the state's plan of conservation and development. This is their POCD. The state of Connecticut's required to do it every 5 years, actually, as opposed to 10 years like you guys do. I went to a workshop yesterday, in fact, on the plan and how the state is planning on revising it. One of the important things about the state's plan of development is it puts restrictions on what state agencies can do in towns. So if a particular town is shown on, it's called the location guide map, but think of it as kind of analogous to your zoning map. All right, if someone from OPM is watching, they're probably wincing, but think of it as analogous to your zoning map. If the state's location guide map zones Newington as conservation land, then the state would not be able to fund a shopping center development or a multifamily project because it's not zoned for that. The state has to comply with its own zoning map. So this is important. in towns that have rural areas that they want to preserve, or areas of town that are not currently sewered, and the town wants to keep it that way because they know that not having sewer is a good way to hold back future development. Newington, though, you're a pretty urban town. I know we're a smaller town, but we are a suburb of Hartford. Newington is zoned almost entirely for full development on this location guide map. So this doesn't impact Newington too much because you're already eligible for almost any kind of development that would be appropriate for your town. But like I said, I just wanted to bring it to the Commission's attention that the state is in the process of revising their plan. They will have a few more workshops on some other aspects of the plan that I'll be going to, and I'll keep you up to date on that also. But today's presentation, what I put in the memo, just for the location guide map aspect of the plan of conservation and development.
Okay, so you feel comfortable that we're not going to be crazily affected by the
Correct.
change if they make changes?
Because in your case, there is no change, really. In Newington's case, there really is no change.
Good.
Right.
Okay.
And then the third item, the performance bond for Newington Ridge Preserve. This is an active adult development that was approved about 6 years ago, just before I got to Newington. And the developer has been building the houses, and he did some work in the street. But the work that he did in Deming Road left the road in less than optimal condition, and the town ultimately ended up having to repair it at his expense. And there is money in the bond that he has with the town. And I'm suggesting that we withdraw the amount of, $2,625 from the performance bond to reimburse the town for the expense that the town incurred to repair the trench that was settling unevenly in Deming Street.
What else does he have outstanding that the bond could be used for?
Right. He has not finished I forget the name of the street itself that this development is on. He hasn't put the second course of pavement on there. There's some landscaping that he hasn't done yet. He hasn't done the gazebo.
He hasn't done the monuments, the pinning, and
How much is his bond for?
It's $190,000, I think. It's a pretty substantial bond.
Is this about a 3 by 5 foot area, approximately 4 by 5, out in a road area?
It's in the road. I asked the town if there was a photograph of it that they could share with me, and they didn't have a photograph, unfortunately.
It's bigger than that, Dominic.
I think it's the whole width of the road.
I think it was a big patch because they went into that road and they chopped it up real good.
Is this before they paved it or after they paved it? Because right now, there's no trench that goes all the way across the road. I went over there.
It wasn't a trench that went across the road. It was right in the middle of the road. And it's close to what's the other street?
Grosvenor.
What's the street that it tees into? Griswold.
Griswold, yes.
So if that's the case, it was repaired and then they paved over it.
Well, what happened was when the developer put it in 3 or 4 years ago, it settled unevenly, and eventually it settled so much that it was becoming a bump or a dip in the road, and so the town was doing some other repairs, and so they repaired this part of the road also. After
so they actually went in and dug it up, recompacted it, put new. And then put their asphalt in, and then sealed the cut area. And
that last part I can't say to, but the first 3 things you said, yes.
Well, it's all been paved over with another course of pavement since then.
That may be true.
You know where it is, Stan?
Yeah, I have an idea, yes.
I'm just.
That's typical of when a road is open.
Yeah.
And it's not compacted correctly.
Right.
Usually about a year later, it starts settling. The town has got a responsibility at that point to fix it. And apparently that's what this bond is how much money it costs to repair that entire road, that section of road. Then if they overlaid it.
Right. This was literally the bill from Tilcon.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
There was also a patch. Well, I drove over there. I remember what you're talking about because it protruded into the other road and it was big and everything.
It was a big opening.
Yeah, it was. And since then, the road has been top course coated.
Yeah.
with another course of pavement. But there is a cut right now, about 3 foot by 5 foot area that's close to that development, and it has not been sealed around the edges of it.
Okay,
So-
that I can't
So
speak
I
to
don't know
that.
whether or not that's something else that they had to cut into the road, and it's a shame because the whole road was top coated, but now we have this 3 by 5 foot area cut in there.
Yeah, but isn't that the way it always is? Every
It's
new
not
road has
supposed,
a cut
not
in
supposed to
it.
be that way.
It should be planned
Not
better.
not supposed to go that way.
That might have been an emergency repair or something, you know,
Yeah.
you don't know.
Yeah.
But what Dominic is saying is true, that the town should follow through, whoever does that, seal it. That'll stop the water from getting in and start
But
doing some
they
damage.
don't, because I know of instances where I had a gas main leak in front of my house. They came and they disrupted it. They opened up the road in 2 different places. When they did it, they patched it. And then a year later, I called the gas company and told them, I said, you better come out here and repatch it. Because the cars were going by and they were going into a hole this deep where it settled. And they did. They came out, and then the town was oblivious to it. But the gas company came out and did it themselves. They came out again, cut it out, recompacted it, did it over again. And now
Most
it's
utilities are the same way, whether
Huh?
it be, most utilities are the same way, whether it's phone, gas.
Yeah, it was like a year later.
Sure,
and
yeah.
But I called them and they did come right out.
Right.
So I don't know how much the town is on top of all those different repairs that go on in the street.
They have 190,000, you said?
Yeah, let me find out exactly. It's in that ballpark, but let me check.
That was my,
We just don't want to,
be short later.
Oh,
you know, because he should really just pay for that outside of
Good.
the bond.
he's just refusing to.
Well, you can't refuse to.
Well, I
Okay, because
mean-
that's not going to be his benefit
Well,
down the road to get,
But we can use the money, yeah.
yeah.
All right, let me see how much there is.
It's 190,000 and the 26,000 is
2,600.
2,600
2,600,
is minuscule.
Yeah.
We probably should just let
Yep.
the town recoup their $2,600. And that's the purpose, right, Mr.
Yes.
Planner? So
Yep.
that the town gets whole again.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
It's,
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
well, let me answer, yeah, 190,000.
190,000, okay. I think there's enough money to cover everything there. Mr. Chairman, I move to withdraw $2,625 from the performance bond for Newington Ridge Preserve to reimburse the town of Newington for the cost of restoring deformed pavement on Deming Street.
Second.
Motion made and second. Any comments, any commissioner remarks? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, Mr. Planner.
Okay, thank you. And that's all I have.
Next item.
That's it.
Okay, next item, communications. We have any communications?
No.
Public participation? No. Commissioner remarks? Commissioner Sobieski?
Just a quick thing, hopefully everybody got the last CROG update that I sent 'em?
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure. Thank you.
Any other commissioner comments at this time?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
With the new with the sign regulations going in place, and hopefully this commission coming up with a method for the zoning enforcement officer to follow for enforcement, would it be possible that the zoning enforcement officer could report to us at each meeting so that we could stay up on top of the violations, so that we don't have to wait a whole month before we hear about if there's a problem?
Commissioner comments on that? What do you think? I think we got to come up with this commission has to come up with how they want him to address the temporary sign, by instructing him that the commission would like him to go out twice a week and do a route through the town. And it can't be just based on complaints. He has to go out and actually find the ones that aren't being complained about. And try to stay on top of it on a weekly basis so it doesn't get way out of hand. Because I'm gonna tell you, you drive down the Berlin Turnpike from Berlin to Weathersfield with this temporary sign moratorium on, that the turnpike looks really good, real good, without all them things sticking out like a sore thumb. It's nice and clean, the setbacks, the 35-foot setbacks and the setback to the buildings make it look like a boulevard type of, you got a wide expanse of, it looks really good. I mean, and,
So,
that moratorium really worked pretty good, so, but we gotta continue it. We're gonna get into where people are gonna be applying for for these temporary signs. We wanna try to keep it as best we, to the way it is now.
yeah, I think it's a great thing that we're allowing the signs back for the businesses and trying to work with them. But I just want to make sure that we stay on top of the enforcement, and that was my main concern. So shall we have the town planner work with the zoning enforcement officer to come up with some sort of method for enforcement?
Yeah.
For the
Almost
next
like,
meeting?
like,
A plan. or
yeah,
a
like
schedule.
Monday afternoon at 2:00, it goes out. And the route is, I know the route wouldn't take more than an hour, hour and a half. I mean, it's the main drags. I mean, I've done it in the town in an hour and a half. You could do the whole town. You could go through all the main streets where the signs would be. I mean, you don't have to go through all the residential areas, but you got to go through basically the commercial areas. That's the Berlin Turnpike, Cedar Street, Fenn Road, Cedar Street, New Britain Avenue, Payne Road, Robbins, all the main drags.
Okay.
I only have one other thing, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Do you think that in the future, this commission could get a copy of the engineer's comments that he sends to the applicants? I know years ago when I was on the commission, we would see all the engineer's comments. So I was just wondering if that's a possibility for the future.
Absolutely.
Maybe,
If you want.
maybe we gotta wait, maybe we have to wait until we have a better completed application with the comments. We're
'cause at the
trying to
moment-
expedite a lot of
and at the
stuff, but
moment, we don't
sometimes
have
we
an
get in
act-
trouble.
And at the moment, we have an acting town engineer, and so it's a little
Yeah.
chaotic, but once that settles down, yeah, absolutely, sure, we could certainly do that.
Do you see any movement on hiring a full-time engineer? I mean, what's going on? Do you hear anything?
I know that we advertised a second time, and that there were about a half dozen applications, but I haven't heard, and that was before I went on vacation, so I don't know if anything happened since when I was gone.
Anything from the council, Carol, Gail? No?
When is our sign, the enforcement thing going to the council? Is that on their agenda?
Carol, when is the enforcement, the ticket system coming to is it on the agenda? Is there any action? Is that gonna happen, or?
I will inquire next Wednesday when we have agenda setting.
Okay. And could you also try to see if you could expedite this process of hiring an engineer? Because this consultant that he doesn't have the background, or it doesn't have the historical, he doesn't have working every day in the town of Newington to be able to, and I think he's far reaching into those regulations to the point where he's over-engineering some of these things.
Actually hired the finance director, so that's a big.
Oh, they hired one? Okay, so can they start working on an engineer? It's really important because we're not getting what we should be getting from it. Okay, thank you. Anything else at this time? I don't have any remarks. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
Aye.